All right. So ActionSA has what they have labeled a tracker of sorts, right? They track the performance of the GNU. They've issued a scathing review of the Government of National Unity's first year in office, assessing the performance through across 6 categories. They're looking at ethical leadership, economic growth, service delivery, and law, as well as law and order. The party says by every metric there, the GNU's failed to deliver meaningful reforms. I'm joined now by Action SA's parliamentary leader, Athol Trollip, on the line. Athol, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Tshidi. Thanks for having me on your show, and good morning to your listeners.
How important was it at the very beginning, a year ago, really, for Action SA to track the performance of GNU, to say we need to hold them accountable, look at everything that they do? How important was it to establish this, and how did you go about establishing it and determining those different categories that you needed to measure the performance of GNU against?
Thank you very much, Tshidi. I think that's a very good leading question because we made a conscious decision not to enter into the GNU. We were invited. We believed that we needed a balance in Parliament. We have a very big government, makes up nearly 70% of parliamentary representation, and then there's a big section that call themselves the Progressive Caucus, but actually rather more like a regressive caucus, with MKP being the official opposition. So we believe that we should play a constructive opposition role, and in order to do that, you need to measure performance of government. You don't want to be, stereotypically critical of everything the government does. So we set up a GNU tracker. It was based on the statement of intent that was issued by the GNU partners, and there were 6 themes that we evaluated: ethical leadership and public service, economic growth that creates job opportunities, 3, enhancing infrastructure for efficient trade and transport, 4, improving basic service delivery, 5, quality education for all, and 6, law and order that upholds a just society. Those were the themes, and then we set about asking parliamentary questions, considering Auditor General's reports on many of those items, and also just, tallying developments in all of those themes.
And let's speak about some of the key findings across those themes.
Well, look, let me start with, I'll go through them all very briefly. Ethical leadership, there's a long list of why they scored an F, but primarily, we're very concerned that, Cyril Ramaphosa made a commitment to fighting a war against corruption, and we haven't seen a single shot fired, really, against corruption. We see that the bloated cabinet is stacked with people that have clouds of corruption hanging over their heads, and Cyril Ramaphosa does nothing about that. And we've also seen his bloated cabinet, entertaining themselves lavishly on the public purse, traveling abroad, living the high life in expensive hotels across the globe. And we believe that that's not a very good example of ethical leadership. Then when it comes to economic growth and job creation, we've seen in the first quarter of this year's GDP figures and market-related figures is that there's a crisis with unemployment. We lost nearly 300,000 jobs in the first quarter, which means every single workday, 5,000 people go home and tell their families that they no longer have the dignity of a job. With regards to enhanced infrastructure and for efficient trade and transport, we've seen some improvement there, and we gave them credit for that. But we know that our rail infrastructure is completely decrepit. It has been allowed to be vandalized and basically destroyed. Our road networks are crumbling under trucks that are transporting goods that should be on rail. But there has been some improvement there. We're still very concerned about the productivity of our courts. And then basic service delivery is where things happen at local government level. And frankly, local government service delivery is parlous. And that's why they got an F for that. And then quality education, we're still very concerned that the dropout rate is so high, that there's a massive difference between government education, former Model C education results, and private school results. The graduation for, post-matric studies in those 3 different spheres of education are just poles apart. And then lastly, law and order, Tshidi. These are figures that indicate very blandly and blatantly how badly this government has performed. Yes, murders are slightly down, but we must never forget that we are the murder capital of the world, so we can't crow too much about that. But gender-based violence is on the ascendancy, Gang and extortion, gang-related violence and extortion is on the ascendancy. We literally are a lawless society, and that was no better put on show than by the delegation that went to the White House. I remember Helena Wasserman wrote a story where she said, for the casual observer, South Africa was displayed as a violent country at war with itself. Now that is a terrible epithet to have for a country like ours. You know what that does to investment, tourism? We really shoot ourselves in the foot when it comes to crime. We should be one of the most unbelievably best performing countries when it comes to tourism. We've got it all in this country, beautifully situated on the globe, but those kind of headlines and the reality about crime in our country makes it impossible for people to want to come here.
It is embarrassing when you say, no, there's no genocide, but there's crime across the board.
Yes.
It really is humiliating, Athol, when that's how you try and explain why there's no white genocide in the country. It is awful. Let's speak about Parliament as well, because I've often noted that there are questions that go unanswered. And I think your track has also been able to look at that as far as accountability is concerned.
Well, that's the essence of accountability. If you have a government that's not prepared to hold a mirror up to itself, and they simply scorn the conventions of Parliament, and ministers just refuse to answer, or they answer in a very generic fashion, or they send you 800 pages of nothing, we have a government that's very arrogant. And unfortunately, that arrogance comes with the size of our government, a 70% representation in Parliament. The GNU is very big, and we are very nervous about big government. We have seen that they've been, not coherent a lot of the time. That's why we had 3 efforts at passing a budget. But still, when they do put their heads together and decide to do something, they could bulldoze anything through this Parliament. So we're very concerned that this government is not keen on holding a mirror up to itself. And unfortunately, it starts at the top, Tshidi. We have a president who's embroiled in the Phala saga, and nobody is wanting to put a microscope on that matter, and that is why we are seriously going after the National Prosecuting Authority, because we will never deal with corruption. We will never deal with the arrogance of a massive government if we have a prosecuting authority that is simply not capable, unwilling, by design or default, to prosecute high-profile cases. So that's why we're calling for the suspension of the NDPP, Shamila Batoy, and we are calling for an urgent investigation into why the National Prosecuting Authority simply cannot prosecute. The Zondo Commission documents were handed to the President almost 3 years to the day ago, and we've seen nothing. They say there's a war, the President is waging a war against corruption, yet we haven't seen one shot fired in the direction of the Zondo Commission.
All right. If you've got questions for Athol Trollip, feel free to call in. Do you agree with the review put out by ActionSA, giving 4 Fs to the GNU, saying that, the GNU's performance over the past year has been completely dismal?
On 92.7
and 106 FM.
It's 20 minutes past 10. We are in conversation with ActionSA. It's put out its report card, its assessment of the Government of National Unity, a year, 12 months into its formation. 4 F grades were handed out for ethical leadership, economic growth, service delivery, as well as law and order. ActionSA is saying that the coalition government is bereft of ideas, it's lacking in policy direction and strategy, and has not reformed government. We're in conversation, of course, with Athol Trollip, who's ActionSA's parliamentary leader. Athol, welcome back. In assessing the GNU, there's a question of the opposition, and you've kind of alluded to it already, that, you find an issue with the MKP and the EFF, saying that they failed to live up to the standard that was set by the DA previously. Let's speak about that, because one would imagine that opposition parties also try find one another, try work together in order to make sure that they effectively hold the government of the day accountable.
Yeah, I do want to say that there is some collaboration between opposition parties in the National Assembly. Things have improved dramatically since the 2024 elections. The ANC was brought below 50%, so the arrogant swagger of the ANC has disappeared. And also there are a big number of political parties in the National Assembly now. And I must say there has been some cooperation. The party that confounds everyone is the MKP, though.
The official opposition.
Yeah, far from being an official opposition, what they appear to have become, because they keep deploying more people to Parliament that were part of the former state capture years, and they are here rather to protect themselves than hold the government to account. And that really has emasculated the benches of the opposition, because they are a big chunk of the opposition, around 59 members. I also heard John Steenhuisen, former leader of the opposition, last week saying that he's come to realize that government's much more difficult than opposition. Well, that's quite a profound statement. But, you've still got to be good in opposition. The role of opposition is a fundamentally important role to hold the government to account. And I'm really proud of the fact that we've got 6 MPs and we're coming up with a report like this. It's objective, it's measured on metrics that are indisputable, and it's measured around their own commitments that they made with the statement of intent. So the role of opposition is very, very important in Parliament. We take it seriously. We are prepared to collaborate. We showed that during the budget, where we supported the fiscal framework on condition that VAT was removed. That was removed by the minister. The EFF and the DA might claim that was due to the court case, but by the time the matter went to court and there was a settlement, it was already moot, because the minister had indicated that he was going to do away with that. So that illustrates that we are a constructive opposition, but we're also a very critical opposition.
There are people who are on the line. There are voice notes for you as well. I'm going to go to Joseph and Rosalind. Joseph, good morning. You've got something to say to Athol?
Yeah, Tshidi, good morning. And thank you for taking my call. Whoever believes that the opposite of what ActionSA has actually found is the case, I think it's living in illusion. I mean, what is just one thing that the GNU has achieved? Just one thing that the GNU has achieved in the past 12 months. Just show me one thing. I doubt if you will show me one thing. Yes, we can talk about the fact that they are still trying to find their feet. They are still new, like any other relationship, but there's no excuse. The issue of Phala Phala, I think for me, is shoved under the carpet. So personally, I feel this thing has not been dealt with to the core, and then this includes your NPA, your Hawks, and to my opinion, I think even the president has got the influence on these particular institutions that are meant to be independent. Let me tell you, the issue of recycling the ministers who are embroiled in the scandals. Take one classical example of the former Minister of Justice, Kennedy. Just as we thought the president will have the guts, to take her out of the cabinet completely, what did he do? He took her to another department. Is that part of renewing yourself? I know this is not about the ANC. ANC talks about renewing itself. And Athol talks about putting the mirror on yourself. They are not putting a mirror on that. They are not they are not accepting. They are not going to be living admission. So clearly they are failing us, and I think we are heading in the wrong direction.
All right, Joseph. Joseph is out in Rosalind. Joseph saying that Athol, you were too generous, you were too kind in your score. I think it's too harsh. It's been just a year.
Yeah, I think Joseph makes a very important point. The GNU often claims that they've saved South Africa from a calamitous situation of having to go into government with the EFF or the MKP. I don't believe that any government should be given a favor or be given a free pass for a whole year. We have got massive challenges in this country around unemployment, crime, and poverty, and that those people who live under the burden of unemployment, poverty, and crime, they can't be expected to continually be giving free passes to a government. Their issues need to be addressed today. So there's no free pass for any government, especially a government that is 70% of control of Parliament. Tshidi, let me tell you another point. This new government has not passed one piece of legislation to address the 6 themes that we have spoken to that come out of their statement of intent. So how serious are they in government? I don't believe they're serious at all.
That's a very big question that you're putting out there, because that's how you see if if politicians are serious about what they're doing, is whether there's movement towards their vision that they've been selling to people. Okay, so in East Rand, I want to bring you into the conversation. You also wanted to comment?
Yeah, morning, Tshidi. I agree 100% with ActionSA's rating, and I agree with Athol. Because I honestly think that this year we need to judge them more about their policies, more than what they're saying. Right? There's a lot of rhetoric that comes out of them, fancy speeches and dabas and everything. But when you actually look at what's changing in terms of the policies and decision making, very little has changed. Instead, what do we have? We have more austerity. We have government jobs that can't be filled because of the austerity measures. We have a collapse of the public service. So I honestly think you keep on saying that they've just had 1 year. I actually want to challenge them. They haven't had 1 year. These people are establishment parties. So DA has governed in the Western Cape. ANC has governed in the other provinces, right? So they come with that government experience.
With some experience, okay.
Behind them.
Okay,
exactly. So we should look at it that they've had 20 to 30 years to get it right. And they failed at every turn.
All right, okay, so in the East End, I don't know if I agree with that outlook that, they've got experience, because then coming together from different world perspectives, that I think has been part of the challenge. Just to some of the WhatsApps for Athol now, Kenneth in Soweto says, the party that was ready to join the GNU in exchange for VAT increase votes, they are bitter because ANC couldn't follow through with their illegal deal, which they had. Athol, that is a thing that people do think about, is to say that collaboration that you had with the ANC around VAT, which you spoke of yourself, for them, the misreading and the confusion is you sound like a party that actually wanted to be in the GNU. And that messaging, by the way, isn't from nothing. It's confusion from some of the leaders in the in ActionSA itself.
Well, I don't know which leaders are confused about that, Tshidi, with the greatest of respect, and maybe you could tell me which leader is, but I'll tell you one thing for sure. I was involved in every single meeting about the doing away of that and supporting the fiscal framework. We made it quite clear that it was on condition that there was no quid pro quo. We were invited to join the GNU. We declined joining the GNU. With 6 members of parliament, we would have got at least one ministerial position and a deputy minister position that we don't want. We don't believe that there should be deputy ministers. And to go to the previous caller, I just want to say that the only thing that's come out of the GNU, only tangible thing that is about to manifest itself, is the president's announcement for a national dialogue. Now, even that is another talk shop. We want action. We are a party of action, and we have no more time for talking. We will join the dialogue, and we will take the voices of South Africans that we've interacted with to that dialogue, but we need action on growing our economy, dealing with crime, improving education, dealing with our infrastructure that's crumbling around our ears, and we want leadership that is ethical and exemplary, and we want our economy to grow. Between Budget 1.0 and Budget 3.0, we have seen a decline in the prospects of our economic growth. And if there was a Budget 4.0 effort, we would have gone below 1%. It is a crying shame that there are countries on this continent, less developed than ours, that are growing at 5 and 6%, and we are limping along at 1%. It is a disgrace, and we haven't got any more time of this underperformance.
I've run out of time, but I'm going to get into trouble. I got to ask this quickly. One of the listeners is asking here, Justin's asking, is the monitor being applied to the city of Joburg? When you have a tracker that's looking at national, what about the city of Joburg and the performance there of the mayor? And I mean, your participants in the city there.
Yeah, look, Joburg is woeful, but I mean, I'm the leader of the Parliamentary caucus. This is a parliamentary tracker on the GNU. I'm sure we could get somebody from ActionSA to talk about Johannesburg, but I don't have a mandate to do that. I operate in Parliament, and our oversight is over the GNU.
Fair enough. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much. Athol Trollip is ActionSA's parliamentary leader, as he points out. I'll try to find answers for you, Justin. I'm also interested in whether or not they've got a tracker, so I'll reach out to Michael Beaumont.
Hanging out with Clement
on 702.
Let's walk the talk.